Welcome to the Future of Field Service podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. Today, we're going to have a conversation about shifting focus from customer service to customer success. I'm excited to have on the podcast today, Mark Hessinger, Senior Vice President for Global Customer Success at 3D Systems. Mark, welcome to the Future of Field Service podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So before we get into the meat of the conversation, just tell everyone a little bit more about yourself, your background, your role, and what the company does.
Okay, so Mark Hessinger, I'm responsible for global customer success at 3D Systems. 3D Systems, we make solutions for additive manufacturing. We make printers, the materials, the software, and have services and support. So the whole solution for a customer going into additive, and that in the plastic space and the metal space. I've been with 3D Systems almost 7 years now, and over my career, worked at several different companies, and I've had the opportunity to work with customers in many different industries. So a lot of global experience in working with customers and trying to help companies move forward in taking care of customers. Mm-hmm. So I enjoy listening to customers, getting feedback, and solving messier problems. Mm-hmm. And then I also like to share what I've learned and know. So I'm glad for this opportunity to speak with you today.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. We've run into each other many times on the event circuit, so this has been sort of a long time in the making. And so when we connected to talk about doing a podcast together and we were kind of thinking about, okay, like what should we discuss, right? One of the things that came up is you have a fairly recent change in your role from SVP Global Customer Service to SVP Global Customer Success. And so what we started chatting about is how that shift in a lot of ways is reflective of your view of service. And I think also kind of the way things are evolving and where things are headed overall, right? In a more holistic approach, if you will. But, you called this in our conversation, the customer in view. So can you tell us a little bit about, what that means to you, why it's important, and what you feel that shift from service to success means?
Sure. There's a few things in the way we think about things, the way we go after things when we make that shift. And it's changing the way we think about customers and what we're doing. So in service, you typically think, I have an issue, I resolve it, I've done my service, right? But in success, okay, so we have an issue, we resolve it, but did we achieve the goal for the customer, right? For example, in 3D printing, a technician could say, I fixed the printer's working, but is it making the parts properly? Is the software still working right? Is the entire solution working for the customer? So thinking that way is a change in how you're approaching the customer. It also takes you then from a more short-term perspective on resolving an issue to a longer-term perspective. I'm helping a customer. Can they achieve their goals? Are they going to be productive? Are they going to recommend us? So I'm not resolving the issue. I'm making sure they're hitting their goals. And then also, as we have more of the functions now in success, we have the hardware team, the software team, the materials and consumables, training, everything for the aftermarket. We still can't resolve everything all the time with our team. So we have to make sure we're thinking more holistically and cross-functionally. Mm-hmm. And the team knows it's their responsibility to make sure the customer is successful. So they will need to pull in any resource in the company to make sure we achieve that goal.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, it makes me think of a few things. I think that, breaking down those functional silos is really, really important to the customer experience and the customer relationship. A while back, I had Bob Feiner on the podcast from Dell, and he talked about I loved his analogy, like think rings, not trophies. So we shouldn't have teams that are trying to be the MVP of the service lifecycle. We should be working together to make sure that we're winning those Super Bowl rings or World Series rings on the overall experience. The other thing it makes me think of, though, is how it aligns with the shift to delivering outcomes, and where that means different things in different industries, and people are at different phases in that journey. But the idea that customers today demand more, and you're focused on, to your point, whatever that success looks like. It could be uptime and what's tied to that for the customer. It could be something else, but it's this outcome you're driving for them versus just making good on your commitment to come and fix something when it breaks.
Yep. So first, just to Bob's comment, rings, not trophies. Previous company, Gerber Scientific, I moved from the EMEA team to the global team. And when I moved to the US, everybody was talking about this one person in service that was winning trophies, right? He'd go in, he'd fall asleep with the customer, he'd spend all his time. And the team was surprised when I moved him into engineering very quickly. And they're like, why'd you do that? I said, because everybody becomes dependent watching him win a trophy. They're not working as a team to get the ring, right? Mm-hmm. So it's part of the team development, making sure you have the right players together to get to that outcome. As to the customers on their outcome, years ago, the conversation was around the service contract and fulfilling a service contract. Today, I'd say the more progressive, advanced customers, it's uptime. It's that they are producing, and they don't care what the issue is. They don't care about your response time, right? They need to be making parts at a certain rate, and that is their goal. Mm-hmm. So it's aligning the achievements to be able to make sure we're talking the same language with the customer, and we're not talking about, we'll be there within 2 hours or whatever. It's you're going to be able to produce parts, and it's also in some of our industries like Formula One racing. We know their schedules and when they need to be doing things very aggressively. So we make sure that we have the right resource to support them. And there's other parts of the schedule where they're not as busy and we don't have to be as quick. So it's understanding how to manage to help the customer achieve their end outcome.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so we spoke about the fact that, one of the foundational elements of being able to do that is getting better at understanding our customers, right? So yeah. Where it used to be, hey, our offer is we'll sell you this, and when it breaks, we'll come and fix it. We're not really living in that world anymore. But to understand how to achieve success in their eyes, you have to know what is important to them. So how do you do that at 3D Systems?
There's a number of touch points we have with customers. We try to collect information. The one I like the most, but is also difficult from time, is just sitting down and talking with customers. So I do that, but I can't meet all of our customers, unfortunately. So listening to customers is very important, and the listening part is important. I've had some meetings where I take a salesperson with me, and the salesperson feels I got to be talking the whole time. It's like, no, calm down. Just you can pause, and then the customer will just start talking and really explaining. And you're not talking about your products and services. You're talking about their business and what's important to them. Mm-hmm. That's the conversation you need to have to really understand what you need to do to help them. We also survey our customers. That gives another data point. And then we will extensively look at our data, how customers are using our systems and products. We take that information. And then we also add information that we want to capture from different customer sites on field service debriefs there at customer sites, and where allowed by the customer, they will give us information if they're using a competitive product or not. And that's where I say we're allowed, because they have to make sure the customer's okay with passing that information through. Mm-hmm. But it's finding those different touch points and collecting that data and trying to then assimilate that and define what are the priorities, short-term and long-term. right? Because we need to take care of some short-term things, but we need to make sure the long-term is aligned to the vision that we're driving and we want to get to.
Yeah. Okay. So then so let's say foundationally, you need to do a better job of really understanding the customer's businesses, the customer's objectives, really what they're trying to accomplish. To your point, you go into those conversations talking about what you can do, you miss the opportunity to learn so much more of what you could do because you're busy talking, right? So that makes sense. But then, I guess the next kind of block in the foundation is becoming easier as an organization to work with, right? So as you understand how they're viewing success better, being open to evolving as a company and restructuring, reorganizing, changing processes, whatever it is, to really take the burden on of streamlining some of the complexity that goes into ultimately delivering that success, right? So can you talk a little bit about, the changes you've had to make there? I know we talked about the negative impact silos can have, and I know that's part of the change in your role, but how have you worked to become easier for your customers to do business with?
Yep. So on the silos terms, I don't think there's any company that designs their organization and said we're going to create X number of silos, right? But silos exist just the way companies operate. And they're not intentional, but you need to be able to identify them, and best ways are from your customers or from your employees. So in the early years, I was at 3D Systems. I would visit customers and they would say, I have to talk to someone in your team for hardware service. I talk to someone else about software. I talk to someone else about materials. I talk to someone else about my next printer, right? So they're time and time again, hearing from customers, we are difficult to work with, right? They don't necessarily always say it that way. They just say, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And you can just hear their confusion. And some even say, I don't even know where to go. What do I do? How do I order materials? We have a broad portfolio of materials, and it's difficult when you hear from a customer that they don't even know how to order. Right? So it's taking those things back. And then, as you said, so then you come back in the company, and I think ours is not different than a lot. People just don't say, okay, let's just change everything around and make it easier. So you have to, present that, market that perspective. But the change happened for us when we did an organization change, pretty significant. New CEO joined, right, and designed how we're going to do with the business units. And then it was like, yeah, we should put together these different functions in the customer success team and call it the customer success team. So it's sometimes it'll happen slowly and naturally, but I think more times you need something that just spurs you need to change, and the company says, okay, we're going to try something different. And if you can point to examples where it's been successful, it helps you also say, look, this is something that's been proven and it works. If you have key stakeholders as customers that you can reference and say, here's what Sarah told me. She told me these things, and I think we can address them. It's not just saying Sarah told me this, but Sarah gave us this input. Here's a potential solution, right? And reinforcing that. So eventually, I think you can get to where you need to be, but customers aren't going to wait, right? You have to start making progress. So whether we are together in one organization or separate, it's still important to communicate to our teams to listen to the customer. And I've been in customer meetings where the service manager said, oh, I'm not responsible for that. And we had a conversation after that meeting, said, yes, you are. We kind of course corrected in the meeting, but that learning experience that, yes, you don't own that particular task. However, the company does, and the customer is asking you and you're in front of them, you can say, I will take that issue and I'll get the right person to talk to you. And that just, those baby steps, I think, makes it a lot of different for the customer perspective.
Yeah. And, that it's making people feel their purpose in the overall, customer experience and mission of the company, right? It's not
Yes.
just about, that's not my job. Well, it's everyone's job if we're a customer-centric organization, right? And I think, that's what's interesting about a topic like this is, you talk about customer in and you talk about, the customer experience. There are things that no one would say don't matter or that they're not thinking about or working on. But the reality is a lot of times, if you're really listening, and I guess listening to learn versus listening to respond, right?
Right.
Then what you uncover in a lot of instances is going to require some pretty significant change. And that's where I think we see this disconnect of, okay, then we'll just focus on getting better at this one thing or this one thing, but we don't really want to become customer centric because of the work it would take to do that, so that's where the conversation gets interesting, because I think sometimes, depending on, the size of the company, the legacy, this, that, and the other thing, it can be very cumbersome to say, okay, we're going to sort of restructure, we're going to reset, we're going to bring these things together, we're going to break down these silos, we're going to make sure everyone knows that this is everyone's responsibility, and so on and so on. That's a tremendous effort. So I'm curious then, as you've done that, what has that change looked like for the frontline workforce? Okay, because we're talking about, a more holistic view of what service is. We're talking about, usually that then impacts the offering, right? And what that relationship looks like. When we were talking about the customer listening, I was thinking, well, boy, that probably has to require quite a bit of upskilling for, anyone that's interacting with the customer that has an opportunity to listen. So as you've worked through this process of bringing these silos, breaking down these silos and bringing things together under customer success, what has that looked like for the workforce, and what challenges has it brought?
So the challenge, I think, in any of these things is we kind of call change management more of a buzzword, but it is a challenge and it is not easy. Right. So change management is very important, and the communication on why we're doing what we're doing, and making people understand how it connects to the vision, where we're going, what change we're going to make. Then you do it, then you communicate why you did it, reinforce that. And if you're in the middle of it, sometimes you feel that, yeah, I know what's going on. Everybody else should know what's going on. But the further you get away from where you are, you get out to people in the field, they need that reinforcement and the communication to let them know why we're doing things. So what changed for the field? You think on one side not a lot changed, but on the other, it's yes, we're asking them to collect information, we're asking them to look around, we're asking them to make sure if there's any issue and they can't resolve it, that is getting reported back. So it's reinforcing that they're not just there to solve a specific issue, but to make sure the customer is, satisfied in its entirety. For our contract sales process, we're doing better now, aligning the start dates for the hardware and the software contracts. So we talk to them together. The materials, some customers do go on contract, and we're getting better at aligning them. And the material sales team now just don't go in talking about material sales. They know if the customer's on contract, they offer a better value if you are on contract, right? So they're bundling and thinking differently, which helps both sides. It helps the customer in understanding what they're getting from us, and it helps us on managing that whole process. People talking, internally, tech support is very the people are very skilled and trained in a specific technology. But again, it's just part of the conversation is, the simple things. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Sometimes you can't solve that for them, but you can take that and go somewhere else. And then I think one of the bigger changes is with the service manager's thought process and mentality, going from that, I'm just going to get somebody there and fix the problem, to understanding we're going to take care of the customer in its entirety. So there's lots of little pieces. And then even internally, when we were customer service, there's still departments that would call us field service, and we didn't feel good about that because there's a lot more to service than just field service. Now we're customer success, and actually some of them are caught up and they're calling us customer service now, right? So it's making sure you're communicating internally so the organization understands what you're doing. Especially you need alignment with the sales team, the field sales team, because they need to make sure they're communicating back and we're making the touch points. And that's another, I've talked to many companies where that is one of the silo examples. I've heard so many service people say it's service and sales separate, right? And I've heard the same thing from salespeople. And if that's your situation, you need to make those changes to get those teams aligned. We have weekly calls between the sales leaders and the service leaders by region to make sure they're one, aligned on escalations, two, aligned on what's coming in the pipeline for sales, also what's coming in the pipeline for service renewals, right? So that we're talking one language and understand how we look at the customer. So it's a lot of, I'd say, pieces together that really, when you add them all up, it's a big change. For each person, there's some level of change that has to happen.
So I'm curious, Mark, we talked about the term customer success, and for the customers that you work with on an uptime or outcome basis, I know we also spoke about making sure everyone feels invested in it being their responsibility to make sure the customer is successful and satisfied. But is there someone who ultimately owns that responsibility? Like, is it, and if so, who is that? Okay.
That comes back to me. And I think that's also a good thing, because I can't say, oh, I didn't know about that problem. It's their problem, right? And like I said earlier, I may not have all the resources to be able to do everything, but I should be making sure we have all the contacts and the information, understand what we need to do, and then looking on the rest of the organization, how do we get the support? But it definitely, that's why we put together the customer success organization, to treat customers that way and to have a point of responsibility.
But you don't have customer success managers.
We have customer success in people's titles, but I don't have an extra function as a customer success manager. It's taking the very similar to the organizations as they were before, but integrating them, the hardware, the software, and the materials pieces, but not putting another layer of customer success on top of that, because my personal feeling is that then deflects. It's not my problem. It's they have to take care of. I take care of my issue, but they take care of the bigger issue, right? And I think that adding that layer and those extra functions would, for me, not drive the right overall behavior I'm looking to drive.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's a topic that's come up from time to time when we talk about outcomes. And we also, when we talk about, and again, this is industry and company differences, but a lot of people talk about how the role of the field technician over time is becoming less technical, right? And a lot more relationship focused. And so we've had some conversations about, not will they become customer success managers over time necessarily the way that we would define that word today, but what will that role look like, and how does it fit in the future in this type of context, if that makes sense. So that's why I was kind of asking.
Yeah, and I think part of that conversation, and I've in parts of those conversations at different conferences and stuff. And it's like a vision. We should, people in front of the customer should be taking care of the customer. But as long as we continue to have, electromechanical hardware systems, which hydraulics, whatever, they have to be, technically skilled and be able to resolve the technical issues. If the customer has confidence that that person can solve that, then the customer is also open. It becomes a trusted partner and then open to share additional information. Right. So it's when hiring, I think it's important to identify some soft skills, as far as communication and how you feel about, working with customers. And as long as they have a technical background, we can then teach the technical skills. I think some of those soft skills are important in the hiring process to bring in.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've been doing a lot of hard work to, align yourselves to customer needs, to be easier to do business with. But I'm sure there's been, not always, it hasn't always been smooth sailing, I would imagine. What has that looked like from the customer perspective? Like, how have you worked through some of the changes as they are visible to the customers?
So customer gets a survey, a transactional NPS survey after a support case is closed. And we put a process in place that if it's a detractor, so 0 to 6, it reopens the case. It goes to the manager of the case owner, and they need to call the customer to explain what we've done, what we're doing, get additional feedback. That extra step in the process of reaching back out to the customer to let them know we're listening. We're sorry for that experience, right? We're going to look to improve that going forward. One sends a big message to the customers that they know that, okay, they've taken the time to fill in a few questions we've asked, and we're actually reading it and we're doing something with it. And that has driven a lot of additional engagement from customers as far as giving us feedback, because they know we're going to do something with it. So that's, from a customer perspective, that's very important. And then, like, when I meet customers, I ask them, have we made progress in the last year, or have you seen a change, right? And usually I get a yes, and they'll give me examples. If I don't get it, then I will kind of probe and say, well, how's this experience? Has this always been the same? And sometimes it sparks their memory, and they say, oh yeah, you were really bad at that. Now it's pretty good. And then, there will be cases where you go and they'll say, no, we're not happy. And we don't like this service engineer because of this. Now, when I get that feedback, we can give that to the manager and the service engineer, and usually those things are correctable. It's usually communication or behavior or something that we can change and improve. And while I find some managers have they struggle initially to give that feedback to the employees actually appreciate it, because they want to grow, they want to learn, they want to do better. There's nobody that goes out there with intention to do a bad job. So it's part of our job to coach them and move them forward. And we had a recent case, customer gave us that feedback. We went through that cycle, coached the employee, and the customer proactively reached out 2 weeks later, said, hey, this is great change. We saw progress, and we're really happy with the way that experience went. That was not on a survey. That was just a proactive call. So it's rewarding when you're getting that type of reaction and feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to then share that with the teams, right? And have them feel that same sense of accomplishment, Okay. So Another layer of complexity in this journey is that 3D Systems is highly acquisitive, right? So you're very often bringing in new businesses with their own systems, their own processes, their own employees. So how do you navigate that and do your best to have that not disrupt this sort of customer centricity that you're working toward?
The most recent acquisitions, the majority of them have been startups. So on those, from the customer success service perspective, they really didn't have an infrastructure there. So we're adding that. And their potential customers often would say, well, we don't know if you're going to be in business, right? We don't know how you're going to support us. So that helps a lot there. I think the bigger challenge that we go through is that we've been around the longest in the industry. When we acquire a certain technology, our engineering team, oh, we could have done that. And yes, we could have, but these are make or buy decisions.
Right.
And the way some of these startups have solved the problem is unique. And we probably wouldn't have solved it that way. We probably would have been more complicated, more expensive. And so that's the value, additional value we're gaining from the acquisition. So for us internally, it's making sure we understand we're not just adding a product line or technology, we're adding a different way of looking at things, a different culture, right? And that's the bigger challenge on the acquisitions is getting our employees at 3D Systems and the employees from the acquired company to really mesh well. And it's good to remind people why we're doing things, point out the positives, and make sure both sides learn how we can get better.
That's a good point. It's maybe less logistical complexity and more eliminating potential friction, and yeah, that's a really good point.
If we were going to do a big acquisition, of a similar sized company, that gets much more complicated on the whole change management, merging two service organizations.
Yeah.
It's the hidden positive of a startup is they don't really have a success and services arm they can lean on. So they're very happy that we can bring that to them.
Right. Yeah. And their customers usually are too. Yeah, yes. That makes sense. All right. So as a leader, what has changed most for you as you've gone on this evolution of looking through the lens of sort of executing service or a transaction to ensuring success or delivering that outcome?
Well, I feel that I can really take ownership of the customer as needed. I don't have to rely on others. I don't have to say, should we do this, right? I appreciate that I can say I'm responsible for taking care of that customer, making sure we resolve issues, making sure we're improving the way we work and moving forward. So it's making sure that the team is executing that. But I think it just not have to worry about should I do that or should I not do that. If it's right for the customer and the company, it's the thing we should be doing. And I appreciate that I can make those decisions.
Yeah, you have a very consistent lens that you can look at everything through that helps guide you. Yeah. And to your point with the new CEO and that restructuring, for that to be possible, everyone has to want to look through that lens, right? And so, it's good that you're in a place where that can happen. What do you see as what comes next on the journey? I know you've already accomplished an incredible amount, but I also know everyone's in
we're not done.
Yeah, it's always right. It's a cycle of continuous improvement. So what's sort of the next phase?
It's continuing going forward, right? I think it's time to probably refresh the vision where we're going. I created one when I started when we were services, and it helped align the organization and get people to understand where we're going, right? And I think that needs to be refreshed. I talk to my team and they kind of look at me funny when I say, I'd like to make an organization that doesn't need managers, right? So I'm talking to managers and I'm saying, I really don't think I need you. That's what they're hearing. But what I'm saying is the organization, I want to keep evolving so that the different parts just work together seamlessly and things flow. Managers should be there to support their organization, make sure things are working, make sure we're training people and managing escalations. But the day-to-day transactional, there's a lot of stuff that goes on already without management intervention. I just like to get managers even further away from the day-to-day, but that takes creating the whole culture, the processes, that the people understanding how do they work together. You don't have to go up through an organization and back down the other side to talk to someone. You just know who the right person is and you get things done. So it's building a culture where we can get more towards that direction. I think that, again, helps us become more efficient on taking care of our customers, makes it easier to work with us, will improve customers' uptime even further and their ROIs. So it all connects together in the end.
Yeah. I just thought of another question, Mark, and I know I'm going off script, so it's okay if you don't want to answer this one. But to that point, when we're talking about getting everyone aligned, has part of this journey, or would part of this journey in the future be, is there any element of how people are measured that has changed to help that alignment?
Nothing major has been done as far as how people are measured, right? There's either you're in a sales role and you get commissions. Now there's some of those where we're connecting what they're commissioned on, or you're in a non-sales role and your objectives. The important part on people's objectives is making sure they connect to the vision and the company goals, right? Mm-hmm. But I'd say we haven't done a lot specific, there's no goal. Make sure you make 3 proactive calls in a week, right? I think,
or it's not, there isn't an element of their performance that's measured off of NPS.
Oh, that we do. Yes.
Yeah.
So NPS, and that's a good point you make, because NPS, well, we do a transaction.
Which is imperfect. So I'm not saying that that's the only measure that could be relevant, but it's obviously a common one.
It's a tool we use. We use transactional and relationship. And on the transactional, it's more towards that event. And people are like, well, it's not just me. Well, we know it's not just you, but you are the primary in this experience. Mm-hmm. And managers will show the ranking from top to bottom of NPS scores. And it does help motivate some people. Nobody wants to be on the bottom of that list. But it's also important to communicate to people that there's a point. If all the scores are good, being on the bottom of the good list is not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So you want to have a cluster of performance in the high bracket. But yes, they definitely do see customer responses to what they're doing. Also, on other metrics, like mean time to complete, first time fix, those are all, you don't want to be on the leaderboard on certain metrics.
Sure, for sure.
And people, if you don't share it, it doesn't help, right? So people didn't want to share like the NPS by person originally because it is a broader team, but it did drive the right behavior as far as, hey, now I need your help also to resolve this, instead of just I'll work on it until I can figure it out, which probably takes a lot longer than if I just asked someone for help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was reflecting on that being kind of a part of this conversation that I missed when I was putting this together, because, again, it goes back to the trophies versus rings conversation, right? If there aren't things that are tied to the overall objective that people are looking at, then they're just going to stay focused on their piece. So that makes sense. This has been great, Mark. I really appreciate you joining and chatting with me. Is there any, I guess, final thoughts that you have before we close out?
Final thoughts. I think it's important as you're managing teams to have diverse teams. You don't get into groupthink, right? Because my team, a lot of them respect what I think, but I don't like it when I hear, what does Mark want, right? It should be, what does the customer want? What does the company want? So you need people in the team that are going to challenge and work together. The collective knowledge, I always say in the room, is much greater than the individual pieces. So make sure the team is diverse, collaborative, working together, and continue to evolve. And these things are a lot of fun. They're very rewarding for the people involved. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share that with you.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming and sharing. I mean, it's clear that you're very passionate about what you do, which I love. I really enjoy, talking to people. I'm the same way, and so I like that. And there's a lot of really good points here about, like I said earlier, taking something that everyone knows is important and a lot of people are doing to a degree, but really thinking about the extent to which you can evolve or change the organization to be that customer in mentality that you are leading. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get to do it again in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. You can find more by visiting us at futureoffieldservice.com. While you're there, be sure to subscribe to the Future of Field Service Insider so that you get the latest content delivered to your inbox every other week. The Future of Field Service podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.